You ever sat in a meeting and thought, why the hell is the dumbest guy in the room the one leading us? You've watched a politician give a speech so hollow, so fake, that you wanted to bang your head against the wall. And then you wonder, why is everyone clapping for this nonsense? You're not crazy. This isn't paranoia. It's a pattern. It happens everywhere, in offices, schools, even in parliaments. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the philosopher who stood up to the Nazis, called it the social magic of stupidity. He wrote, "Against stupidity we are defenseless. Neither protests nor force can touch it. In this state of affairs, stupid persons are often made into tools of evil without realizing it." This video isn't about ranting, it's about understanding why society, by design, keeps rewarding the loudest voices, not the truest ones. The Dunning-Kruger Effect, the psychology of crowds, the invisible mechanisms of power. We'll tear them all open, so that by the end, you'll finally see. It's not that the incompetent accidentally rise to power, it's that they fit the role better than you do. You've probably heard this line before. The fool doth think he is wise, but the wise man knows himself to be a fool. Shakespeare wrote that in As You Like It. But it's not just poetry. It's a brutal psychological truth science later named the Dunning-Kruger Effect. It describes a paradox we see every single day. The less people know, the more convinced they are that they know everything. Meanwhile, those who truly understand a topic hesitate, question themselves, and always feel they're not good enough. Not because they're weak, but because they grasp the vastness of what they don't know. And that's where the social game turns dark. In competitive environments, the workplace, politics, even social media, confidence is mistaken for competence. A person who speaks loud, firm, and certain immediately looks like they know what they're doing, when in truth, they might have no clue at all. Bonhoeffer called this the blindness of the stupid, a state where people not only don't know, but don't know that they don't know. That blindness breeds a false kind of courage, one that looks convincing from the outside. That's why in a room full of people, the loudest voice, even if it's the dumbest, often gets heard. Not because they're right, but because they look sure. And in a society that prefers simplicity over depth, sometimes looking sure is all it takes. That false sense of certainty becomes even more powerful in a world that's lost its direction. Because people, smart or not, hate ambiguity. We hate that uneasy feeling of not knowing, of hanging between two answers with no solid ground. When we're anxious, we don't search for truth, we search for clarity. But truth, especially complex truth, is rarely clear. Those who truly understand a subject usually start with words like, "it depends," or "it's more complicated than that." They hesitate, analyze, set conditions. They use maybe instead of definitely. Meanwhile, the ones who don't know much, they're fast to conclude. They speak in short, sharp sentences, simple, confident, easy to repeat, and most importantly, their words don't make people more afraid. That's why in times of crisis, economic, political, moral, simplicity always beats reason. As Bonhoeffer wrote, slogans, catchwords, and the like have taken possession of him. He is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in his very being. The crowd can't tell who thinks deeply. They only feel who makes them less scared. And so, the one who says something simple, even if it's wrong, has an advantage over the one who says something true but complicated. Not because they're right, but because they're easier to digest. That's how simplicity becomes the most dangerous political weapon. And once it's worshipped, the complex minds, the thinkers, suddenly find themselves at a disadvantage. It sounds absurd, but it's true. Being too smart can actually work against you. Not because the intelligent aren't capable, but because they think too damn much. The smarter someone is, the more they doubt themselves. They don't rush to believe, not others, not even their own ideas. They analyze the risks, see the dark sides, ask, but what if I'm wrong? And sometimes that depth of thought costs them a beat. And in politics, one beat of hesitation means one lost opportunity. There's more. Smart people are often restrained by conscience. They don't want to manipulate. They don't want to lie just to please the crowd. They can't promise what they know they can't deliver. But as Machiavelli warned, a man who wishes to make a profession of goodness in everything must necessarily come to grief among so many who are not good. Meaning, if you live too righteously in a world that isn't, you'll get crushed. And that's exactly what happens. In the game of power, what people want isn't the one who's right, but the one who dares. Dares to speak loud, dares to bend the rules, dares to use tricks to get ahead. Meanwhile, the smart ones are still asking themselves, is this the right thing to do? And while they're still thinking, someone else has already stepped onto the stage. That's how intelligence not only slows you down, it makes you disliked, not for being wrong, but simply for being too smart. In a world where the crowd holds the votes, anti-intellectualism doesn't just exist, it runs the show. People say they want competence, but they trust familiarity more. The moment someone speaks with nuance, uses unfamiliar words, or shows they actually know something, they're branded as out of touch. The crowd doesn't hate the ignorant, they hate the person who makes them feel ignorant. The higher your education, the simpler you must sound. The deeper your understanding, the more you must pretend not to know. The higher you rise, the more you must bow down to reach the crowd's comfort zone. Not because you have nothing to say, but because when you tell the truth, no one listens. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once warned, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. Because the wicked can be reasoned with, the stupid cannot." Worse still, they vote for people just like themselves. So if a leader wants to survive, they face two choices: play dumb and be loved, or stay intelligent and be replaced. And from that, a cruel paradox blooms. The wiser you are, the lonelier you become. The truer you are, the more out of place you feel. And those who get chosen are simply the ones clever enough to act ordinary, even when they're empty inside. Once a society grows used to distrusting intellect, brilliance starts to look suspicious, not because it's wrong, but because it's unfamiliar. By instinct, the crowd chooses what feels familiar over what is truly excellent. They don't choose those better than themselves. They choose those most like themselves. People who speak their language, share their worldview, and think in simple, comfortable lines. But real leaders, the exceptional ones, are rarely familiar. They see what others can't. They speak truths others don't yet understand. They act on logic the crowd hasn't caught up to, and because of that, they appear alien. And the crowd, like any living organism, reacts the same way the body does to a foreign object. It rejects it. Aristotle saw this over 2,000 years ago. The best regime is the one that fits its people. Not best in an objective sense, but best in the sense of matching the people it governs. A leader too different, too visionary, too brilliant won't be chosen. Not because they're wrong, but because they don't fit. That's the great paradox of democracy. The crowd, the very people who don't know the full truth, are the ones choosing who leads. And instinctively, they pick whoever makes them feel safe, not whoever could actually take them further. So if you're too talented, too sharp, too awake, you'll be seen not as hope, but as a threat. And when the masses choose sameness over excellence, they leave the door wide open for the cunning. Those who understand that stupidity isn't just a weakness, it's a weapon. In Letters and Papers from Prison, Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote about a kind of social magic, a force where stupidity stops being a flaw and becomes a collective weapon. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither protest nor force can touch it. Reasoning is of no use. Facts that contradict personal prejudices can simply be disbelieved. The fool, Bonhoeffer said, doesn't need to be convinced. They've already been possessed, not by logic, but by slogans, catchphrases, and synthetic emotions. They become loudspeakers for the ones pulling the strings behind them. And here's the brutal truth. These people don't seize power. They're put there because they're harmless, easy to control, nice enough not to scare anyone. The real power stays behind the curtain, in the hands of cold, calculating minds who understand exactly how the crowd works. They move the pieces while the puppets smile on camera. That's the tragedy. The wicked hide in shadows, while the fools carry out evil in broad daylight, without even realizing what they're doing. And that's when we face the darkest truth of all. The problem isn't the fools in charge, it's the system that keeps choosing them. When wooden idols with microphones become the face of hidden power, the real question isn't why are they so stupid? It's why are we so easily persuaded by them? The system isn't broken. It was built this way. It chooses the easy to swallow, not the most correct. It favors short-term stability over long-term change. The person who speaks loudly but safely, who knows when to smile and how to repeat the right slogans, will always have a better shot than the one who brings complex, uncomfortable truths. Aristotle spelled it out in politics. It is not always the best men who rise to the top, but the ones who best fit the needs of the moment. So once you understand this mechanism, you'll be less shocked, less angry, less expectant. You'll stop asking, why are my country's leaders so bad? And start asking, why am I, and so many people like me, so easy to manipulate? Understand so you don't live in illusions, wake up so you won't be led, and more importantly, don't expect too much from a game that was never designed to reward the most deserving. Because in reality, as we've seen, truth always loses to what's easier on the ear. And if you grasp that, you'll realize that waiting for a savior, smart, moral, reasonable, to fix the whole system is a beautiful but dangerous fantasy. This system isn't broken. It runs exactly as intended, to keep the crowd comfortable, even if that means sacrificing truth, quality, and the future. So the final question isn't, when will we have better leaders? But rather, when will we be clear-eyed enough to stop clapping for the loudest voice, and brave enough to hear the truth, even when it hurts? Because, as Bonhoeffer warned, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. If you've ever been swayed by easy promises, if you've ever believed the stage actors just because they looked like you, this isn't a scolding, it's a reminder. It's time to look deeper, listen harder, and choose the hard path over the easy one.